welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the Sci-Fi Queens podcast, where we celebrate all things sci-fi, real women in science, and up-and-coming scientists as well. And we also celebrate sci-fi book authors and comic book authors as well. If you are new to our channel, we ask that you hit that subscribe and notification bell so you'll know when our next episodes are coming up. If you want to support our channel, check out our website. It's scrolling at the bottom of the page, sci-fiqueens.net. You will find information on the queens, when our next shows are coming up, and our link to our merch store. I am your host, Nita, and with me tonight are my beautiful co-hosts, Sarah, the Queen of Darkness, and our very own Queen of the Nerds, Tiffany. Tonight we're gonna be
Hello.
doing yes. Tonight we're gonna be doing something so special, so different. We're gonna be talking about the impact that sci-fi has had in our lives, as well as hearing from some very special VIP individuals that have submitted a brief video and share their stories with us. So this is going to be a fun night of stories, a fun night of just sharing our thoughts on sci-fi. And if you want to put something in the comment, tell us your stories in the comment of what sci-fi has done for you, the impact it has had in your life, that would be wonderful. We would love to hear from you. But let's check in with our queens. Sarah, how are you tonight?
I'm a little warm, but it's better than it has been. It's only 80 tonight, but it was above 100 before, so I'm good with this.
And Tiffany, the queen of the nerds, coming to us with audio only, but she is here. Oh, how are you doing tonight?
I'm making it. It's Friday, so we're gonna make it work.
That's right. That's right. So we're gonna start out hearing Tiffany's story, um, and her story about how sci-fi has impacted her life, and then we're gonna share a very special video that, of course, we need to start out with Jace, queen, sci-fi's queen, founding queen, of course.
Pounding.
But Tiffany, why don't you start by telling us your sci-fi story?
Well, my sci-fi story is probably like a lot of other like little sci-fi kids. When I was like in like elementary, like going into like fourth grade or third grade, one of those, I started reading like the Harry Potter books, and no one else in my class was like reading them. Like I wasn't in one of those schools where everybody was reading them. It was just like me. And so I had these big books and I was just reading them, and nobody else had nobody talked to about it. And so I felt kind of like I had friends, of course, but I felt like I couldn't talk to my friends about that kind of stuff. So then, and when I was going into the fourth grade, the summer before fourth grade, I know I'm like so young, um, the the Star Wars Episode 1 came out, and that was my first like sci-fi movie I went to the movie theaters to like see. And so that was my introduction to sci-fi. And there were so many other kids there. And I made a friend who I still talk to today. Like, he's like one of my best sci-fi friends. And we could talk about absolutely anything new that comes out. He's like, have you seen this? I'm like, of course. Like,
Hmm.
like so that was an impact on me because I met someone at that movie premiere with all the other little kids. He was dressed up. I wasn't dressed up because I didn't know that people were going to dress up. And so
Hmm.
now after that, I knew this is a thing. But so it really impacted me because I met him. And so that's my sci-fi story.
That is beautiful. And it's
It is.
something that is so relatable to everyone. I think everyone can relate to hiding their
Yeah.
sci-fi joy.
Yeah.
I think so.
Being
I
that
think
nerd.
so. Yes. Now, our founding Queen Jay sent us the first video. He immediately sent it to us, and we're going to listen to what he has to say. And it's so beautiful. Let's take a look.
Really don't remember a time where science fiction didn't play a big part of my life. I was born of a certain generation, a certain age, and a certain time period where everything coalesced. For me, in my world, that science fiction made such a significant impact. And, being born in 73, you can do the math, but I was at prime age for the Star Wars generation. You know, being 4 when the first one came out, being 7 when the sequel, and then Return of the Jedi being 10. Just that alone drew me into science fiction. Also, without around just Star Wars, there was a lot more in the cinematic world that drew me in, even if that was Close Encounters or getting to see 2001 in the cinema when it was re-released. Even things like Tron, The Last Starfighter, Ghostbusters, E.T., the list goes on in the 80s in regards to science fiction. It was, look, I know it's probably not the greatest decade for film in general, but for science fiction, that period was really strong, and that's what sucked me in. I never really read science fiction or read science fiction comic books at all. Um, Everything has come from the visual medium for me, primarily through film. When I first started dating my wife 30 years ago, and you have some pretty serious discussions if you're stupid early on. Um, and it's not the one you're thinking of. The critical question for us was, what movies do you like? And we would go back and forward on types of movies that we liked and didn't like. But we always agreed on science fiction. Interesting, isn't it? Oh, the other great thing about Star Wars, too, as a gift was me being 4, 7, 10, the ages around that original trilogy, the way the universe works. In 1995, I had my son Joshua. So in 99, he was 4 years old to see The Phantom Menace. And he went through that same age cycle that I went through with the original trilogy. And man, that was a joy. To be able to not only see him from a fan from my perspective, but to see it through his eyes and be able to enjoy that again and, getting into the toy world with him around that kind of stuff. Yeah, I can't imagine there'll ever be a time that science fiction doesn't play a big part of my life.
That is so beautiful.
Mhm.
I absolutely love his story. And I'm glad that Tiffany went first because Tiffany and Jace have that Star Wars connection, I think, in a special kind of way. What do
Yes.
you think, Tiffany?
Yes, when I heard him start talking about Star Wars, I was like, me and
I
Jace are
think that.
twins. We're sci-fi story twins. It's a backstory. It's a
Absolutely.
meet cute, actually.
Absolutely. So you guys are parents. How do you connect to Jace's story as moms, bringing your children into sci-fi?
For me, like my son, he like I was telling you, I think Sarah last week, we used to always play the Lego Star Wars games and stuff like that together.
Mhm.
And like he started liking like little anime things, and then so that was like his bridge into really wanting to watch like sci-fi and wanting to read comic books and wanting to just be really involved in anything if it has anything to do with space. He was like, oh yeah, is this Star Trek? Yeah, oh yeah, I heard of this. Like he would just be hearing the stuff. I didn't know he knew what the Mandalorian was. And next thing you know, he's like, oh yeah, I know about this. Like he's watching things I don't even know he's watching. So I think like the small little bridge from us playing a Star Wars game when he didn't know what Star Wars was into him like watching this kind of stuff was like, uh, my heart.
Aw. How about you, Sarah?
Well, I never. I'm probably the bad parent for this, but I never really filter what I
Yes.
watch.
No.
Well, no, because
Just-
I think because I didn't filter what I watched, Leah has a firm grasp of what's reality and what's not. Like
Yeah,
people gave me grief for taking her to see Deadpool in the theater. Like
she knows it's
she's a
fake.
kid, she knows it's fake, right? She knows it's not real. Like she was watching The Walking Dead with me when she was 5. She knows that like this isn't real. So I mean, it was just she would come out and she'd be like, "What's this one? Oh, what's this one? Okay." She's like, "What's going on in this one?" And like kind of like Tiffany said, like, "What's this one about?" And
Right.
and she still does that. And then like she launched herself into the Marvel universe, and
See?
like she's gone. Well, and it's kind of amazing because she got a book from one of her teachers, and it's a Loki chapter book. Like it's an actual like text,
Nice.
not a textbook, but a book, and it tells Loki's story when he was a kid and like his friend and all that, like this
Nice.
weird stuff.
She had let me
But
borrow that.
she's actually reading it. And then I got a book for her like 6 months ago, and it's a Black Panther book. Same kind of thing, that it's his backstory from when he was a kid and like and growing up in Wakanda and all that. Because I thought, maybe she'll get to it eventually. Well, she's just now like getting into this Loki book this summer. Like she's actually reading. Oh my God, she's actually reading. Um, and
Yay.
like she's taking her book with her. Like that. I mean, oh my God. Well, because she has dyslexia, so it's really hard for her sometimes to read, but
Mm-hmm.
she's doing better and practice. But I gave her this Black Panther book for her birthday last week, and it's like the next one in the series, I guess. I didn't know they were related, but there's like a whole series of these backstories for these characters or novelizations or whatever. But like I don't care if it gets her into reading and it brings her into
Mm-hmm.
the
Yes.
into the world. That's all that matters. And and she likes to. We went and saw the new movies with Ray. The three new ones in the theater. We saw all those together. So, like Jay said, I got to do that with her. You know
Mm-hmm.
how you got to see them when they were kids. And I was at the midnight release for episode one,
Mm-hmm.
and that was like the first midnight release I went to. I think I was 17, and it was crazy. The theater was packed. I remember I was like third row on the side, and the movie was like this big, and
I
I couldn't
know.
hardly see anything, and it was so overwhelming. But I was there, and that's all that mattered. And it was the energy, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. So I want to share that with Leah. So we do go and see um, movies. What was we saw the Spider-Man with all three Spider-Mans in the theater
Mm-hmm.
opening day, the first showing, and his theater
It's
exploded.
energy. Yeah.
Yeah, and being able to share that with the next generation and pass that on,
Mm-hmm.
that's how we share our love. We don't.
Mm-hmm.
It's not worth it to try and force it on them, and like Jason was saying, the '80s, because that's when I grew up. Like it was the golden age of sci-fi, because like there was cop movies and there were sci-fi movies, and that was like it.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, honestly, so that's I remember like all the movies he was listing off. I'm like, yeah, I remember all those movies, and that was kind of the big thing then. And then kind
Hmm.
of went. I mean, The Matrix did good, and they continued on with some of the franchises and stuff. But sometimes they like peter out, and then they come back around, and it's like they thought Alien was done, and like, oh, this is a dead horse. We're not going to do this. Like, hello, we're all still here. We all still want these movies. Kind of like Iron, how Iron Man launched the MCU because, hey, we want those movies,
Yeah.
and passing that to the next generation is going to keep it alive and keep that energy going. Anyway,
We
sorry, I was
have
ranting.
no, no, it's okay. We have a beautiful comment from Eric Williamson, who we need to bring back because I'm reading the where we were the voyage, and it's got me all messed up in the brain. Okay, talk about sci-fi horror. There's something wrong with him. I think they dropped him as a child in the head. No one could write this way and be normal. Okay, I'm loving it, but it's scary. Okay. He says, love bringing sci-fi into my kids' world. It allows them the freedom to explore creativity and to think big, to
Yeah,
dream.
and
Yes,
yeah.
that is so true. Sarah, go ahead. I'm sorry. You're the
No,
mom.
no, no. That's when Leah was a toddler. We had that Amazon Kids whatever, and there's a lot of like educational, but also like, I mean, there there's always like the little like Blue's Clues and stuff like that. But she wasn't ever really into that. It was like more there's this guy it was called Artie, and he was like an alien, and he used to make like crafts and stuff and like show kids how to be creative, but like, oh, let's build a rocket ship, and then like take paper and crafts and like make a rocket
Yeah.
ship. And I think that approaching it that way, or whatever they imagined, a dragon or whatever, and just being creative. I think I think sci-fi kind of gives you an open door, if that makes sense, because there's like
Yes, it does.
there's no limit to what you
No,
can
you could do
imagine.
sci-fi romance,
Sci-fi
thrillers,
horror.
horror.
Yep.
If you can think of something, sci-fi can be a part of it.
Hmm.
It truly can. But we're gonna go on to our next video, and this is from Dev.
How has science fiction influenced me? Well, it's influenced me from a young age. So I would say the first lesson I learned from it was to never assume what something is because of how it looks or how they look or anything like that. Because there's definitely more to something than meets the eye. That is a lesson I learned from Transformers growing up. Star Trek taught me that we are better than this, and that our future is working together, and that our similarities outweigh our differences. Science fantasy like Star Wars has shown me that sometimes you have to call out evil because that is your duty, and that you have to fight for the good of everyone. Shows like Battlestar Galactica and movies like The Terminator have taught me that just because we can create something doesn't necessarily mean we should, or if we do, we need to take responsibility for it. That we need to treat it the way we want to be treated. That's how you avoid the robot rebellion. Shows like Doctor Who have shown me that anything you could think of, anything you can imagine in your head, there's a lot more out there. That you should never let your imagination be limited. Mostly science fiction has showed me that there's more to the human condition than anybody could possibly imagine.
So true. I mean, if science fiction has taught us anything, is not to judge people
Right.
by their outward appearance.
Hmm.
Because how many alien species have sci-fi come up with that is like, oh, they're not so bad. They
Hmm.
just look scary.
Well, I mean, your favorite species on Star Trek, the Klingons. I mean, they're. They're a warrior culture, but they're also steeped in tradition, and they have these
Yeah,
deep rituals and this deep kind
yeah,
of built-in religious kind of
yeah.
brevity, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Just kind of like, it's
Hmm.
not that their whole culture is built on it, but they take it into account before they do anything. And
Yes,
but at first glance they just look like fighters, but they're just big old
they're more
sausages on
than
the
that.
inside. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, even I would dare to say, the Jem'Hadar in Star Trek, right? They
Mhm.
seem like these warriors, and that's all they are, but they're brilliant. And
Right.
they
And then
had a whole entire culture before the Dominion came and took that from them.
yes, and made them addicts basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but this teaches us that things are not always what they seem.
Right.
And I think that that's so important and so relevant in today's life, that
Hmm.
it's like Eric says, the more you know.
Yes.
It's absolutely true. The more you know, the better informed you are. And I think that
Hmm.
science fiction has been able to capture fiction, right, the made up,
Yeah.
and the truth, and put it together to teach us lessons about what's happening in our world today.
Hmm.
But we're going to go on to our next one from Mr. Eric Williamson himself.
Sci-Fi Queens, yours truly, Eric Williamson here, back once again. So, what does sci-fi mean to me? Sci-fi has never really been just about the future for me. It's about what you can do with the story. It's For me, it's the only genre that lets you pull from philosophy and horror and poetry and theory and hold it all together without breaking. I like to think of sci-fi as sort of the great joiner. It combined with any other genre, romance, horror, memoir, poetry. It allows you the freedom to ask those hard questions, to use strange and evocative forms, and create something that resists the need to be explained. That's why I chase sci-fi in my work. I, for one, love books that don't behave and stories that implicate the reader and narratives that sort of fold in on themselves like some twisted origami. And sci-fi gives me the tools and the language to do just that. Sci-fi doesn't just influence how I write, it's changed the way that I thought writing could be. It gives me, as a creator, the space to push, to break structures, and to say the things that aren't allowed in other genres. In its way, sci-fi gives me comfort and takes that comfort away. It gives me tools to use and rips those tools out of my hands. And that's why I use it. That's why I trust it. And that's why I love sci-fi. Keep doing the amazing work that you are doing at the Sci-Fi Queens, and I cannot wait to watch your next video. Eric Williamson signing off.
I love that. I absolutely loved it. But yes, what he says is so poignant because you could take anything. And I know I'm a big Deep Space Nine lover, but Deep Space Nine truly does have an array of sci-fi. You've got sci-fi war, you've got sci-fi religion, you got sci-fi and different aliens, you have sci-fi and culture and romance. Everything you can think of, it's there. And that's the beauty of sci-fi. While it's reaching to all of these topics, it's also teaching us these lessons of life, of what's happening today. What do you think, Sarah?
I think that's true, and that, like Eric was saying, that because I mean, you never know where something's going to take you. Like, I was thinking, I think when Tiffany was talking, that, I didn't start reading sci-fi until later on, like I was in high school, but like middle school, I think I started reading romances, but then the ones that I really liked were like the sci-fi romances. I mean, they were bodice rippers, obviously, because, I mean, totally inappropriate, but they'd be like this alien brute, looks like Fabio, but there's a whole culture on this planet, and
Yeah,
like how, and I was just thinking about that you find sci-fi in like in everything, in
everything.
every genre, everything that's out there. And sometimes, like, I watched a movie today, and it was supposed to be just, like an antebellum movie, and it went sideways, and I mean, it turned into horror, and then it went sci-fi at the end, and I was just like, oh,
We
what the
even have sci-fi cookbooks.
yes, I had Neelix's cookbook when I was in high school. Yeah.
Yeah, there
um
is nothing sci-fi can't reach into and
right.
create something. Because a lot of the things that he would say he was making didn't really exist. This was all part of the fiction of it all,
Yes.
right? And it's actually wonderful. You have a comment, Sarah. This is just for you, so you'll read it.
Sarah and Bodice for being sci-fi. Bingo card spot complete. I mean, I mean, that's what my mom used to call him, because there's always that, like, Fabio, and then a girl with her bodice torn on the
Yes,
cover.
it's so
I mean,
true.
so my mom always called him, "Oh, you reading another one of those bodice rippers?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess."
Smut the
I mean,
smut.
because that's why we didn't call it that when, back then. Now it would be straight smut, but I mean, I mean, but it was another avenue into sci-fi, and it was like how Leah's
Yes.
reading these Marvel books. It's like whatever gets you into reading or gets you into sci-fi, or helps you better yourself in any way. That's what sci-fi is about, is making the world better and making people better, I think.
Now, the next video I want to show is from Mel. She happens to be here at the comment section. She is always very supportive, and she sent in her video, and it is so beautiful. Guys,
All right.
listen to this.
To do. You're so awesome. Um, what's up? I'm Captain Mel Asylum of the Starship Rebellion and author of Unreading the System and soon to be many more books. I've always had an active imagination, and in first grade, we went to library, and the librarian showed us a video about how an author, a children's book author, lived their life and what they did in order to make the books that we read. I thought this was the most awesome thing in the world until I got diagnosed with dyslexia and was told that I would never be able to do it. Which, due to that diagnosis, I was able to get tutoring where I had a teacher who was pretty awesome and decided that I would do best if I wasn't given a prompt. So of course I wrote my own Power Ranger fan scripts. I would write about 5 of those before I started creating my own superhero teams. I created at least 2 of them. For annoying reasons, I would let it go for a while until I finished high school and remembered how awesome it felt to write stories. So I decided to take out all my frustration from the years of middle and high school into writing a story, which was Theory of Rebellion. Before attempting to publish it in any way or consider it an actual book, I had an English professor who was okay with me being lazy about a creative writing project, and I took a chapter out of that book and sent it in as one of my assignments. And she asked me if I wanted to be a writer, and I told her that I couldn't because I was dyslexic. And she said, that doesn't matter. Editors are a dime a dozen. People who have great creativity are rare. And then I looked up how much editors cost. I would let that fear kind of control my thought process, despite the fact that my imagination was constantly running and I wasn't doing anything with it, which was frustrating, until my early 30s, when I was like, you know what, I have this. I had Theory of Rebellion. I held on to it. I'm like, let me try to do something with it. Then after I published 3 Theory of Rebellion books that I later deleted, I decided to do what I truly wanted to do, which was science fiction. And that's when I wrote Unrooting the System. Some of the influences to how I write my science fiction was a lot of the conversations that I've had with my dad growing up, the politics in Star Trek and Babylon 5 and even Star Wars. He really sparked a lot of my curiosity towards how groups of people come to be the way that they are. How did Star Trek become this utopia? How did the Babylon 5 become the hot mess that they are? Why can't they get along? Why are they still babbling? The aspect of religion and how people just basically perceive the world was such a huge aspect of science fiction. So thank you, Sci-Fi Queens, for inviting me to speak. And that's a short explanation of how I became a sci-fi author and what makes me want to write sci-fi.
She is so awesome, and I love her story. I feel
Yes, it's
like,
amazing.
yeah, I love her book too. I absolutely do. And if you haven't, guys, haven't read it, you need to read it. It's beautiful. And it really, I love that she was told she couldn't do something and she ended up doing it anyway. I think that a
Yes.
lot of teachers, tend to jump, like back in the day, and maybe not now, would jump with the no, you can't do that because you don't do this or you're incapable of. And there's this mentality of bringing you down,
Yeah,
right? And
you're a square peg that doesn't fit in the round hole. And yeah,
exactly,
just because
exactly.
you do things differently doesn't mean you're not still going to get to the same destination.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Absolutely. I'm with you on that. I think that, having her prove that she can do it and then write in it. Sci-fi is not an easy genre to write in. You have to come up with a world that doesn't exist and add reality to this world so that people who are reading
Mhm.
it can connect to it, but still keep it so um so different and so unreal that it
Yeah.
has those elements. And the science in sci-fi has influenced everything in real world. There isn't someone who didn't come up with some kind of scientific, creation or technological creation that was not influenced by science fiction. So it's
Right.
a big, it's I think it's one of the most difficult areas to write in. See, because it's you got to connect to your story, but at the same time, there are no wormholes or prophets.
Right.
It's just there's no founders, no changelings. Like you have to come up with these things, and that takes a great mind. I
And
tease
what,
Eric all the time, and I tell him he's damaged because he comes up with these sci-fi horrors, but he has a
well,
great mind.
and I think that it can be done, and I applaud people who actually do it. I know that I talked to Devin about this. I just read a book, and it wasn't specifically sci-fi. It was a fantasy book, but like it was rubbing me the wrong way, like three-quarters of the way through the book. But I'm like, I'm not one of those. I don't just stop reading the book because it'll nag at me and like what happened. So like, but it's like I was trying to explain it to Devin. I said, he's like, is there too much world building? Because he's one of those, he doesn't like world building books. He wants to read a book that where like he likes to read Star Trek books because that or Star Wars because that universe is already created. You don't have to
Yeah.
explain anything. You don't have to start over. I like the world building, but like I think this one, I said it almost feels like, and I don't know if it was a style of writing or what, but it was like you walked into the story in the middle of it and like you were missing so much. Like maybe it ended up like in a previous draft or something, but I applaud like Eric and Mel that they can make their end result cohesive, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Where
Yes.
because like this book I don't remember what it's called, but it was so rough and I was like I actually had to like switch to something else and then come back to it because I was just like, what? I don't like my brain was not braining. I'm like, wait, what's happening? Like, and it should have been great because she was a scientist and there was all sorts of technical stuff. And like, I'm down with the technical stuff. She's talking about mycelium and she's talking about moss. And I'm like, okay, I'm good with this. This is stuff that I like. And then like, it was just, there was another layer that was missing. And I think that if you have the ability to create create a world and put it on paper and bring it to the readers, that's a wonderful talent. And I applaud Mel and I applaud Eric and all the other authors. And
Yeah.
it's hard, and I
Yeah.
know it's hard because I know that I think in middle school maybe I dabbled with writing stories, but that was where I struggled because it's like you can get so wrapped up in world building and then like forget your story, or do you have to build your world and then write your story and then bring them together? That's something. I
Exactly.
mean, I should probably ask them next time we have them on. But
Yes.
I applaud them for that. And then I just wanted to say, Mel, you did perfect. You didn't
Yes.
misunderstand the assignment. It was their
No, not at
sci-fi's
all.
impact to
Hmm.
you, and sci-fi's impact on everyone is different,
Yeah.
and it shaped your life, and it made you were told you couldn't do something, and you're like, hold my beer, I can do this, or hold my pen, I can do this, and that is
Exactly.
amazing, and that's what we need. I think that's something that people sometimes forget that sci-fi brings. It brings us the resilience to keep trying, and that's one of the underlying messages in all sci-fi is to just keep going.
Yes. And now we have another one here from my buddy Michael. And he is up late to join us in the comment section. Um, and I do podcasts I'm often on his podcast, um, which I'm doing this Sunday. We're going to be talking about D Space Nine's The Waltz episode. Oh, yeah. But his video kind of made my eyes tear. It was
Okay,
the
bring it
most
on.
beautiful story. You guys got to hear this.
Incoming transmission.
Wilson to Sci-Fi Queens. Yes, hello everyone, and hi to viewers of the Sci-Fi Queens podcast. I am, if you aren't aware, Michael Wilson. I am the creator and host of Hit or Miss Who Trek and Silver Screen podcasts, and I've been asked by my good friend Nita to provide a little, just short video for the Sci-Fi Queens, just explaining my own kind of history with, sort of sci-fi in general, but with a very specific focus, as you can probably guess. Star Wars, I do. But yeah, so just basically to explain why, how science fiction has impacted me just a little, and how it's affected my life. Obviously, my first love, my biggest love will always be Star Trek, as you can probably see. And yeah, that started when I was very young. My mom used to watch Star Trek, the original series, with me, and that taught me a lot. It taught me from episodes like Let That Be Your Last Battlefield that, the folly of bigotry, of judging by something as foolish as skin color. On a similar note, as seeing Lieutenant Uhura on the bridge, just on a regular basis, like it was normal, I think helped to normalize things like that and not see them as unusual or strange, and embrace more of a multicultural society. That also, of course, feeds into the Star Trek IDIC or IDIC idea, infinite diversity in infinite combinations, borrowed from the Vulcans. So I think from an early age, I was taught to be very supportive of others, and certainly others who were perceived as different, even at times when they were kind of, perceived as the enemy or perceived as lesser than. But on a more personal level, one of the things that drew me to sci-fi in general, and to Star Trek specifically, was always the idea of the outsider. There's often this character that feels like, they don't belong or they don't quite fit in. You see this in a lot of sci-fi movies and things, but obviously, if I'm having to give you an example, I'm going to lean back to Star Trek. And I'll say that from a very young age, I always used to, I was always focused on Mr. Spock from the original series. He was always my favorite character, and I could always relate to him. Didn't realize quite how important that connection would be until many, many years later. It wasn't until I was in my 30s that I was diagnosed as neurodivergent, as being autistic. And a lot of things fell into place then, that I would relate to this character who struggles with emotions and fitting in and mixing with humans, shall we say. And there's something, there's someone like that in all the Trek series. I also obviously gravitated towards Data from the Next Generation, Odo from Deep Space Nine, to a degree Worf as somebody who was, torn between two cultures. And so, that's kind of always been a personal representation of mine in science fiction. It's the way that's affected my life has just been because I've kind of always loved the morality and the moral lessons it gives us. I've always been strongly supportive of the idea that science fiction uses its genre to comment on things that, are affecting us in the here and now, even if it is through a lens of the future or fantasy, etc. And I think I've learned an awful lot of moral lessons from, Captain Picard, Star Trek, or any number of science fiction movies that have taught you, 1,000 things that we could get into, but we'd be here a lot longer than a few minutes. And so, I think it has developed my sense of morality and my sense of self as well, like I said, of understanding myself and understanding the universe, which is also a big idea that you get from sci-fi. And it's also responsible for me just doing the things that I do. It was through science fiction films that I got to love movies, and that led to, my degree in English and film studies, which led to a film podcast and a Star Trek and Doctor Who podcast. And so as I say, sci-fi is always going to be my favorite genre. It's always the thing that I love. And I think there's a lot you can get out of it if you just open your heart and your mind and embrace it. So, hopefully we can all do that. And in the meantime, live long and prosper.
Isn't it beautiful how sci-fi teaches us to embrace others?
Mm-hmm. Well, and the one thing I like about Star Trek is that, like, they don't imagine a future without disabilities. They imagine a future where disabilities are just accepted, and they make adaptations, and we move on. And like Geordi's visor, and then later his eyes,
Yes.
and then there's the lady on Deep Space Nine that was in a wheelchair.
Melora.
Yeah, her. And and there's and like he was talking about, like how Spock struggles with his emotions, and like basically, yeah, I mean, if you look at it from that perspective, he's autistic as heck. I mean,
All of
that's
Vulcan is. All of
right.
Vulcan.
Yeah, which is cool, because then, I mean, I don't know about you, but it makes me feel not so lonely and weird out here, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes. Star Trek has always made me feel less alone because
Mhm.
and in sci-fi in general, but Star Trek specifically because it's where my love of sci-fi began, has always made me feel less alone,
Mhm.
and less different, because who's more different than the people in Star Trek?
Right.
um you know and and I can understand when he said he connected with Spock. And I know this is going to be strange to some of you who know my love of Klingons, but I started out as a Star Trek TOS girly, and Spock was always someone that I understood because he was the only one like him, and I always felt so different that I felt his character understood me, and I connected to his character in that special way. And seeing so many people of different cultures, African American, Asian American, there was Russian representation there, Scottish representation. There was just so many different cultures that it made the world seem so like it could be better.
Yep.
And I think that Star Trek is one of those series that has improved on that and made sure that they open the doors to all these different cultures.
Hmm.
And I think that that's beautiful. It truly is. And I think that the lessons we learn from all sci-fis is pretty incredible. Even the ones that are like a little bit kind of, this is kind of B-rated kind of movie, you could still
Yeah.
learn something from them for sure.
Yes.
You know?
Well,
Yeah.
and then, like, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that it's something that helps people feel seen, and I think
Hmm.
that matters.
Well, and I think that another recurring theme, and a lot of it is in, you see it more in zombie movies, but like in all sci-fi really, is that
Hmm.
it's not the monsters you need to be afraid of, it's the other people. And
Oh,
that,
absolutely.
it it kind of reminds us that, you know, it brings us both sides, like the future and the possibility of humanity, and then like the dregs of humanity, if that makes sense. But it brings both sides to the light, and that we need to, and like Star Wars taught us that we need to find balance somewhere. That,
Absolutely.
you can't have one side without the other. And it's like, like we talked about that, like how do you get to utopia? Well, you're gonna have to have a lot of carnage to get to utopia. Because
Yeah,
utopias aren't born; they're built on ruined nations. And it's a recurring theme, and sci-fi is hope to me. I
yeah,
always think that even the darker side, there's always a light in the darkness.
absolutely. We're going to hear from an indie author that actually will be on our show um, later on this year. I believe in September he's coming on. I'm reading his book and I'm reading Eric's book, and I gotta balance them out because this next author got me all in my feelings
It's a
about all the
reason.
characters, and Eric got me all scared out of my wits. They both got me all crazy. But this is James' story.
Hi, hi. I am award-winning science fiction author James Allen McGettigan, and I'm here to tell you about how sci-fi has influenced me. And I would say that I'm actually inspired more so by the lack of ingenuity in the sci-fi genre over the last like 20, 30, 40 years. And a lot of that comes from the predominant acceptance of the idea that every story that can be told has been told. Every possibility that can be explored in science and, technology or alien races or whatever has been explored in some fashion. And I believe that's not true at all. It can't be. With the relative scope of our understanding of how the universe itself works and all that, there's no way that every story that can be told has been told. And especially in science fiction, again, like you see a lot of redundancy in the type of stories that are being told, especially in terms of movies and how, Hollywood kind of just rehashes a lot of different things that have come out in the past. um, and I'm inspired by what is possible in my imagination, because that's what imagination is. You're ideally supposed to think of something that speaks through you, something that you created, something that I created, not, some rip off of, like, something that Arthur C. Clarke or Dan Simmons did 20, 30 years ago. It doesn't matter. That's not necessarily using your imagination to its fullest potential. And yeah, sure, like at the end of the day, whatever I or anyone else might think of with this perspective, they might, have an idea that's not as original or the most original thing ever, but at least I'm putting in the effort to try and, make something that's more my own and unique to me. And that's what really influences me in my creative ingenuity in the sci-fi genre. Is I really look at, like, not only what's possible, I try to build off of it, but I try to, like, ask myself a lot of what if questions and try to break beyond the boundary of what is possible, or our understanding of what's possible in science fiction specifically and in other genres as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you later.
He's right. We do see a lot of remakes happening.
Yes.
And like there's so much to explore within science fiction that is so important that I think that if that inspires you to come up with a new story, I say go for it.
Mhm.
How do you feel about these remakes happening, Sarah?
Um, Sometimes, I mean, I think that I I like them because I think sometimes they don't age well in like, so now we're up to the third Fantastic Four movie. Actually, there's another one out there, or a couple more, I think. But like in my lifetime, we're up to the
It's so
third one,
true.
and Leah's been watching them because she wanted to get into it. She's like, so I watched this one, and then I watched that one, and she's like, and it's the same story, but it's like told completely differently, and it's also told through a different perspective and a different scope, and how the lens of the era that they're made. Does that make sense? Like
Yes.
how things were brought on the original Trek. And then like, oh my god, it was so woke, and oh my god, and a black woman on the bridge and an interracial kiss, and oh my god, and now we're just like, whatever. But I mean, it needed to happen at those times. But when you remake something, you can take that stigma, something that was a stigma before, and make it more integrated. Like, and we're seeing that with the new Strange New Worlds. Uhura's on the bridge, and she's got her natural hair care routine, and that's
Yes.
something that we wouldn't have seen. But like, that's something that we see now that we wouldn't have seen before. So like, I'm okay with this because it's not taking away from the old. The old's still good. It's just, and it's telling it again in a different perspective, and maybe giving, there's less restrictions, or there's a
Yes.
different angle on the story that
Yeah.
maybe we didn't get before for whatever reason.
Mhm.
Or like some of the I've noticed it. Leah's been watching some of the older Marvel movies, and Marvel's been okay with it, but sometimes some of the other movies, like there's like the further you go back, the more misogynistic they get, if that makes sense. And
It's
then
true because if any young
and
person today who
mhm,
watches Star Trek the original series be like, "Oh my god, the way they talk about women is," but
right,
they were really hip compared to
and yeah,
how
and
society really talked to women.
right,
You know?
and that's but that's also the joy of remaking things is that you can, yeah, you're retelling the same story, but maybe you're making it better because you're improving on it or taking out the bad stuff. And
Yeah,
I think I mean, some people don't like it. They're like, oh, I only like the original version. I don't like this. Like, I'm sure there's people that are like, oh, I only like original Trek. Shatner's my boy, and like, but there's or like the people are like the original trilogy of Star Wars, and that's it. Everything else is fake. But that doesn't
exactly.
help. That doesn't help anyone. Everybody's welcome to their opinions, but everybody can be. No, there's no limit on how you can be a fan. Does that make
Yes.
sense? And that's the beauty of sci-fi is that you can be a little or a lot. And I mean,
Yeah.
you can be, oh, I saw, I waited for it to come out on Disney Plus and I watched it, or I went opening night and I dressed up. And it doesn't matter. You're still a fan, and that's the scope of it.
Yeah.
You're allowed the energy that you're willing to put into it,
Yeah.
and
And I think if that inspires you as a writer or as a filmmaker to come
mhm,
up with something fresh and new, then let it inspire you. I think
mhm,
inspiration comes in many forms and can hit us and be our muse in different ways. And
right,
if you're inspired by the fact that you're not getting enough diversity in that sci-fi genre, then you know what? It's awesome that you put your feet in it and go, I'm gonna go into it.
right.
Because the book, the trilogy that he's got, and I think it's gonna become a series. I'm on book 2. It's a sci-fi military story, and it is pretty awesome. So
Are they
you can
Space
put
Marines?
sci-fi, yeah, you can put sci-fi in anything.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, anything. And
yeah.
if you're creative enough and you're fortunate enough to have that creative mind to write down these ideas and bring them to life, then I say go for it. Get your inspiration from all angles that you can, you know
Mhm.
um
Well, and then
because
we
I
also
think
have
that's
to,
important.
right, and then there's also that we have to be, in times of political unrest, sometimes it's easier to go back and make something over than try and do something different because maybe different is too much. And, maybe revisiting something that we've visited before, like all these remakes that we're having right now, you know, and they're necessary, they're needed, they are going somewhere. Um, and it's just, I,
I mean, there are
I
times
think
when I
it's
go, not another one of those, and it's like,
right.
come up with something new. And so I totally understand his perspective on that,
Yes.
but to draw inspiration from that, I would have been given up. But he drew inspiration from that. I think that's
Mhm.
pretty cool that you can draw inspiration from something that you feel is lacking, you
Yeah.
know? So we're gonna go on to um, our lovely Miranda. She's been on our podcast here before,
Miranda. I
and
like
she
Miranda.
sent us this. Yes, she's awesome, and here's her story.
Miranda Ragland. You might know me as Miranda Janelle on your favorite platform. I'm on them all too. So our question today is, how has sci-fi influenced you? And when I think about this, it's, oh my gosh, so many different ways. The very first that comes to mind is imagination. Things like flying cars, robot friends, intergalactic exploration. What is alien life actually like? Can it come visit us? It's just so many different things. Even thinking like, here on Earth, like our ocean floor, what's it like? Are we ever going to be able to breathe that stuff from the abyss? Like, I don't know. It also makes me imagine, like, how are we going to be different? 100 years from now when we've advanced, or hopefully we've advanced. Just so many different things to like imagine. It just sets my imagination absolutely on fire, especially when I'm staring up at the night sky, just imagining what's going on out there. Another way is with like leadership and decision making. I'm really thinking about Star Trek with this one. Like the Picard School of Management type stuff. But also seeing the different viewpoints of people on your team and how you go about making decisions. Like when do you listen to them? When do you assert yourself? I actually picked a lot of that up from various different sci-fi properties, and it continues to influence me to this day. Another really, really big one is humor. Like, just immediately Red Dwarf and the running Smeg gags. Like, I don't even know that I would know what Smeg is if my brother hadn't introduced me to Red Dwarf. And, like, just, there are so many things to take away from it, not just Smeg. I mean, hopefully you don't get Smeg watching it, but, I mean, you could. Maybe. I kind of lost that one. But, like, there's just so much humor in sci-fi, and I think about like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Marvin being a depressed robot, genuine people personality type stuff. Like, that's hilarious to me. It's just like looking at things in a little different light, like humor. It's wonderful. But another major area how it's influenced me is in personal growth, especially when I see myself in a character that I don't like, because that gets my brain running and like, okay, how do I actually address this? So I could go on about this for a very, very long time, but I was told to keep it 2 to 3 minutes, and I'm pushing that boundary. So thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
I love when Miranda says,
Right.
when I see something in myself in a character that I don't like. I didn't expect her to say that. And that is a really true, because if we're honest with who we are, when we see those traits, we have to go one of two ways. We justify them or we address them. And depending on what you want to do is which direction you go. And for sci-fi to do that for you, that's like mind-blowing to me. Mind
Well,
blowing.
it kind of has to be. Are you going to be the hero or the villain of your story?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And sci-fi makes you think about that. And I think that's another thing that's great about sci-fi is it makes you think about those deep thoughts without
Yes.
and it's not like right up in your face, like comes a long way around and like surprise, like wait, what? But I think that's a good point that pointing out the ugly in some of these villains or whatever, and you're like, hey, wait a minute, and then you can take from that what you will. Either you can address it or move on. But I think the hope is that you'll address it and maybe overcome it and grow from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, and if sci-fi can help you, do that introspection, then again, sci-fi is awesome. The next person we're going to listen to is W.O. Torres. He will be here in November celebrating with us Hispanic Heritage Month, and I'll be reading his sci-fi story. I love the new indie sci-fi list that's out there, which I'm going to share with you guys later on again, because it's helped me find authors of all areas of life. So he's an amazing author, and this is his story.
Going on? This is W.O. Torres, and I'm making this video because Nita from Sci-Fi Queens asked me to talk about science fiction and how it has influenced my life creatively and just in my regular day. So when I was 7 years old, on May 25th, 1977, I saw a movie in the theater called Star Wars, A New Hope, and it changed my life. It's all I could think of when I left that theater, when I got to school, and I saw that movie 10 more times that summer, which up until that time, I had never seen a movie more than once. I've been obsessed with science fiction and Star Wars and all things science fiction related ever since. I got into Marvel Comics shortly thereafter. That session has continued. Today, as I make this video, I'm in a hotel room and I'm about 2 miles away from San Diego Comic-Con, which I'm going to in the morning. So science fiction, even before I saw Star Wars, I read my first Ray Bradbury story, and it's always been connected to me. And I think the one thing that connected to me was that once I found out that these were just crazy, theoretical, fantasy, imaginative ideas that writers wrote, and that you could just make up any shit you wanted to, that's when sci-fi really, really connected with me. And for about 43 years of my life, I was a consumer of sci-fi, which was okay. But in the last 7 years, I've been a contributor to sci-fi, which is amazing. So tomorrow, as I go to Comic-Con, I am still a big fan of sci-fi and a consumer of sci-fi, but also am a contributor of sci-fi now that I have a science fiction trilogy out, Tomorrow Lives Today. So yeah, thank you, Sci-Fi, and everything you've done for me in my creative life.
I love that he thanked Sci-Fi for that. That is so beautiful. I absolutely love his story. And it took people think you got to start writing when you're a kid, but you could start later in life, and that's okay too. Like, things change and you have to embrace those changes. And I think that's a sci-fi thing. I truly do believe that. We have 3 more videos. They're beautiful. I know we're going a little bit over our normal time, but people were so generous to participate with this episode that I do want to show all of them. And the next one that I want to show you is from our friend Joe Dove from the Captain's Quadrant.
Incoming message.
Hello, Sci-Fi Queens. It's Joe Dove! Or Joe Dove. I don't know. Whatever you want to call it. Listen, sci-fi has been one of the biggest influences in my life. Not because I became a great scientist or author or some type of visionary, but because it's given me hope and a lot of times when things seem hopeless. I'm the son of a
Hold on one second, guys.
from
Okay.
far places to ensure that we lived as good as life as we possibly could. And because of our friend Cosmic Mom, who we affinity.
Just a little technical difficulties, guys. Give me 1 second. I'll start this over.
Great scientist or author or some type of visionary, but because it's given me hope and a lot of times when things seem hopeless. I'm the son of a disabled woman who went to and from far places to ensure that we lived as good as life as we possibly could. And because of our friend Cosmic Mom, who we affinitively love in the Captain's Quadrant, I was introduced to sci-fi.
Let's go back to Joe. Let me clear it up a little bit. But we got Joseph here. He's been on our podcast before. We'll listen to him, and we'll get back to Joe's video because it's actually really beautiful and touching.
Hey y'all, Joseph the Platypus here. So what impact did sci-fi have on my life? Well, I was introduced to sci-fi when I was about 3 or 4 years old. I remember staying up late and watching reruns of Star Trek, the original series, with my mom. And so my mom had a passion for Trek and sci-fi in general, and she passed that on to me. So I grew up watching Star Trek, Star Wars, anything that had sci-fi in it, I watched. And kind of inspired by sci-fi to always learn. I've always had a fascination with science and astronomy and technology because of my love for sci-fi. I remember going to the library every weekend with my mom and getting books on tech and science and biology. And that inspired me when I went to college to major in the sciences. I actually have a degree in biology. But I work in tech now, and I work in cybersecurity, of all things, just because biology was not where my passion lay. And I've always had just this natural ability for tech. And I kind of transferred, moved on from biology, took a really beginner job at the med school I worked at in technology, and did that work. And just kept on learning and growing. And it was just so passionate. And I remember I got into tech because I wanted to play this game, Wing Commander 3. And to play it, I had to upgrade my computer, so I learned how to do that. Sci-fi related game. Mark Hamill had the live action cutscenes in it. And so that was kind of my journey, was to always be inspired to be better, because that's fundamentally what science teaches us, sci-fi teaches us. And yeah, I've just been growing ever since. I've been in my career for almost 25 years now, and I love it. I still love sci-fi. I still love Trek. And I continue to grow and learn because of that passion.
I love his story, how he got his degree because he was influenced by sci-fi. That's awesome. But knowing, also realizing this is not where I need to be, But we're going to listen to Jason Gaston.
Means to me. Well, to me, science fiction is more than just stories set among the stars or in the distant future. It's both a warning and a promise. What does that mean? It's a warning of what might come to pass if we fail to take responsibility for the world that we shape. If we allow technology to outpace ethics, if we choose fear over understanding, convenience over conscience, and power over compassion. Science fiction holds up a mirror to our flaws. Blade Runner, for example, warns of losing our humanity to the machines we create. The Matrix shows us a world where ignorance is comfortable but costly. Black Mirror, it explores the dark corners of our digital dependencies. These are all cautionary tales, not predictions, but possibilities meant to stir us into action, to urge us to ask hard questions before we arrive at the answers on our own and, quite frankly, too late. But it's not all doom and gloom. Science fiction is also a promise, a vision of what we might become if we rise to become our better selves, if we embrace unity, diversity, curiosity, and the boundless potential of human ingenuity. No franchise captures this better than Star Trek. In its universe, Earth is no longer divided by race, class, creed. Hunger is gone, poverty is gone, war, at least among ourselves, is a distant memory. It paints a future where humans explore not to conquer, but to learn, to seek out new life, not as enemies, but as kindred spirits. Star Trek taught me that the stars are not just a destination. They're a reminder of what we can achieve when we dream together. When Captain Picard says, "We work to better ourselves and the rest of humanity," that's not fiction. It doesn't have to be. That could be our mission statement for the entire species. Science fiction dares us to imagine, to believe that the future is not something that happens to us, but something that we can build together. Whether it's the hopeful rebellion in Star Wars, the brutal lessons of the Expanse, or the cultural unity of Battlestar Galactica in the face of annihilation, these stories all share one truth. The future is ours to shape. And as Doc Brown said in Back to the Future, let's make it a good one. So, for me, science fiction is not just entertainment. It is a compass. It warns us of the cliffs we might fall from, but also lights the path towards the stars. And it reminds me, always, that the final frontier is not just space, it's who we choose to be.
That is so true.
Yes.
It's who we choose to be. And
Yes.
it does give us a glimpse of what could happen if we go one way and what could happen if we go another. And what happens when we don't take care of what we have here. Excuse me, I'm a little sick. I'm sorry. Um, let's see, Joe always got to be troublemaker. Let's see if his video is going to play properly now.
Captain, incoming message. Hello, Sci-Fi Queens. It's Joe Dove! Or Joe Dove. I don't know. Whatever you want to call it. Listen, sci-fi has been one of the biggest influences in my life. Not because I became a great scientist or author or some type of visionary, but because it's given me hope and a lot of times when things seem hopeless. I'm the son of a disabled woman who went to and from far places to ensure that we lived as good as life as we possibly could. And because of our friend Cosmic Mom, who we affinitively love in the Captain's Quadrant, I was introduced to sci-fi as a little kid. My uncle and my mom played Star Trek, but on the behest of my grandfather, whom I never got to meet. But he was an early African-American police lieutenant, and he ensured that we all watched Star Trek. Well, they all watched Star Trek. I wasn't born yet, because Ahura, like him, was a lieutenant police woman. He was a policeman. And there was hope for us in the future. So that's one reason. The other reason is because no matter how dark and dystopian things may get, there is a story of light and goodness in the end. There's always a moral that says, hey, things are going to get better, I swear. And somebody's going to be the one to lead that reason that we are going to have a better existence. Whether it be a captain of a starship, whether it be a hero, a heroine, a woman in a dope suit that takes out a queen alien. Either way, we're going to get saved in the end. And because of someone's decision to take up arms or lead the fight in many ways, it doesn't always have to be fisticuffs. It could be something more along the lines of just scientific breakthroughs. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping in the future we'll get a scientific breakthrough. We're close to having exoskeleton suits, kind of like the ones I kind of jokingly reminisced about in Alien. They are making those suits available to people here in the world, and I'm hoping that they'll come to the United States because it would give my mom the opportunity to walk again. Because I miss walking around with my mother, and that would be something that I would absolutely adore. And I think that science fiction becomes science fact, and this would be another one of those science facts moments that we would really appreciate. So that's my minute or two. Thank you, Sci-Fi Queens. This is Joe Dove calling in, hailing in frequencies from the Captain's Quadrant. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
I loved his story and how he included his mom. And he's right. Sci-fi has influenced even medical technology.
Yeah, that's what we've done episodes about that we've talked
Mhm.
about how science fiction becomes science fact and things that you were saying that too, that a lot of advances that we have were originally imagined up as science fiction and now they're fact. I mean, AI, VR, wearable tech, any of this stuff. It was all a dream. Like we talked about it that the very first wearable watch that was a phone was Dick Tracy in the 20s. And
Yeah.
that was just cool and imaginative, but now it's fact. It works
Yeah.
and it's real.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely. Yeah. And this is the influence that sci-fi has had in the world in general. But we have reached the end. Thank you guys so much for hanging in there with us. Before we go, I do want to let you guys know that our next episode will be August 15th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to be reviewing the sci-fi movie Moonfall. It's going to be awesome. Our movie queen, Nicole, will be joining us. And this is a really I'm looking forward to this episode a lot. I also wanted to remind all of sci-fi indie sci-fi authors out there, if you want to go check out Chase Gamwell's website. There is a link there that you can promote your indie sci-fi book or comic book there. And it's all for indie sci-fi authors. And it's growing. And I think that they're almost up to like 90 authors, if I'm not mistaken. So definitely check it out. We did an episode. I did an interview with him on July 11th. Also, check out that episode. It's going to be pretty awesome. And thank you guys so much. We see you on August 15th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And good night. Thank you for watching the Sci-Fi Queens. And be sure to support us on all our social medias. And check out our website,